Hey yo! All right, so real quick, I just wanted to talk about some things here. This is pretty cool. I mean, I like what's going on here. I mean, like the drawing itself, it's great. I mean, super cool composition. It has a nice flow. You even design all the special details in there. Very cool. I like how that is at a pretty dynamic angle. That kind of comes in at us like that. You got the sword pointing up this way, characters that way. It's a lot of diagonals, and the more diagonals you have, the more dynamic a piece will look. So pretty good there, I think. But as you mentioned, things kind of get frustrating when you start using color, and especially if you haven't done a lot of traditional painting or studies. So okay, so the question is, what would I do? I mean, it's working like in this area. I mean, parts that work pretty well. It's like, okay, there's a light source, and these things are receiving light. Yeah, cool light. Skin tones are a bit off, but it's still not too bad. I think as we go out here, I know it's unfinished, but it's not working, and I think you have to establish a, I guess, zoomed out, low resolution version of your painting, almost looking like it's done, and then you start going in and refining things. And so if I were to do this, let's kind of bring back the line work. I know it didn't line it up perfectly, but whatever. So if I had to fix this without starting over, a couple things that I would do is obviously paint in this guy, but also I guess it's more of a finish thing. So color-wise, it's like it's a bit muddy. Like there's no continuity. So usually what I like to do is unify or harmonize all of the colors by making a new layer, setting it to overlay, and either picking blue or orange or something to kind of harmonize everything. And so watch what happens when we put like a warm orange glow on the whole piece, right? So it unifies everything. Obviously it's way too much, so I usually go too far and then bring it down back a little bit. And so now it all seems like it's making let's say a color statement that's contiguous. And so from here I'd be like, okay, well, it's definitely warm over here. I kind of want to bring back some of the cool over there, so I might even grab some blue, some midnight blue looking stuff, and make a gradient coming from the moon going this way. Now it's a little bit more effective. Actually, what I'm going to do is something a little different, like that, and lower the opacity because I don't want the blue to be that strong. And so the difference is right now it's kind of as it goes into shadow and darkness, it's kind of gray. And so what this does is it fills it in with that color statement of warmth, right? But that's if I was to kind of keep going with what you already have. I'd even like bring up some more of that rim light coming from the moon, especially since it's so bright, and kind of just let it kick up onto these spots that are facing the moon, right? And now when we zoom out, it reads as three-dimensional. Why? Because the more light sources you have, the more form the thing will appear to have, three-dimensional form. So especially here, and you could certainly like lower the opacity of that if you don't want it to be that strong. But when you zoom out, it looks like it's automatically reading more. From there, I make a new layer, maybe set it to lighten, and pick some kind of blue so that it acts as a nice little glow on that rim light. I will tone it down in a minute because I'm sort of pushing it really far, and then I pull back. All right, so I'll grab the eraser, the airbrush, and sort of erase out. But now it's like within seconds you have a pretty believable three-dimensional form, whereas before it just feels kind of flat. I mean, it looks like you got rim light there, or the secondary light source, but it's not as strong or believable as what we have here. Another thing in terms of values, I think, so if there's a light source, like a lantern or something, I would like to, I would usually isolate the values around it so it stands out. And it's tempting to make everything bright around it, but I would do this, make a new layer, set it to lighten, not lighten, darken, and not multiply, and just kind of just fill this in a little bit, especially over here, so that the highlight on the clothing stands out too. And this is something I would have already established early on in the painting, like maybe 5 minutes in to the color comp. Right, And now when we zoom out, the lantern like acts as like its own standalone thing, because now it's a graphic read instead of being this thing that gets lost and the only thing holding it together is the line work. So you kind of want to use your values to your advantage, because if we look at it in black and white, you can see it, but now you can just barely see it. And so now we have an element of graphic information here. We have some 3D form here, and then it just starts to feel a lot more complete. And this is the sort of treatment that I would give like everywhere. But if I was to start over from the beginning, let's actually bring the line work back, and I'm just going to smudge everything out. And so here we go from there. Let's kind of start over. And so when I do this, sometimes I'll just use a photo or a painting that I've done before, maybe something abstract. But basically I just want noise everywhere. Not noise, just kind of information, whether it's color information, sometimes texture. But I like to do this because it sort of starts to, what's it called? You might find happy accidents of unexpected things. You might discover a nice area of contrast that you might not have if you tried to calculate it. Sure, I'll leave the moon fairly bright. This whole area is going to be a little bit darker. But when I'm doing this, like if you look at it in black and white, I'm trying to minimize areas of contrast so that I can push and pull values. You'll see what I mean in a moment. So just kind of blurring everything. It's rather messy. I might even use the airbrush to make it smoother and cleaner. By the way, this is using the mixer brush with airbrush right now. Let's look at these transitions. You don't have to use the mixer brush. You could use a regular brush too, whether it's airbrush or whatever. So yeah, like I said, the first things first is establish a finished painting within the first 10 minutes or so. So basically what that means is it should look finished when we're zoomed out like this. And then once it looks finished here, you could slowly start zooming in and picking your focal points to render them. And you don't really have to render absolutely everything. So yeah, let's go ahead and duplicate that. We'll go with the lights first. So I make a new layer with everything just pumped up with brightness. And I'll make another version where it's just dark. Right? And so let's bring this back. So now there are two different layers, right? And I'll hold Alt and then press this button for the mask. And now wherever I paint with white, it'll reveal the light layer. So I'll pick 3 spots. Definitely the lantern. The moon. And this is the same composition that you had. And then from there, I'll go in and then sort of start carving into it using just a black brush on that mask to take away the light. And so as I do this, it'll be something like that. And I'm not concerned with colors at all right now. It's more just value. And it's like you start with one place and then it sort of grows outward, right? And so what would happen if there's a light there? Well, there would be some light on this tree here. Definitely on this side a little bit. Maybe on the top side of this, right? Okay. I'm actually going to make this layer darker. Yeah. So that it seems like it's really at night. And then over here on the face, okay, yeah, then it's like, sure, of course there's going to be light on the face, which is what you already had. So that's pretty good. It's going to be light here, there, here. You sort of just kind of try and map out the topology in your mind and try to figure out where the light is going to hit. And then of course we could still bring in some of that glow. Right. And then from here I would do it on the other side as well. This is where the rim light will be. By the way, for this I would definitely find some reference of like what's actually happening with light from underneath. And what happens is the nose casts a shadow like that, the forehead casts a shadow like this, the cheeks actually cast a shadow as well, the mouth. This isn't perfect, but this is relatively a rough version of what really happens. And you can actually blend on the mask layer too. Right. All right, cool. So far, as I look in the thumbnail here on the top right, this area looks pretty good. It's decent. I think I want the area behind the trees to be a little darker. I think what I'm going to do is make a third version that's almost black and do the same thing with the mask and then fill in these areas. So that we have a nice visual activity where we checkerboard light against dark, dark against light. Right. And then, yeah. And then over here, we definitely have to make that bird silhouette against that, the moon there. And then we'll actually cast some light on it from the lantern in a moment. But I'm already establishing as much as I can loosely here. So the moonlight is definitely going to hit this, that. You know, for the moonlight, I might actually, I'll just skip to the next part and flatten everything. The moonlight, I'll take some of this cool light and then put that there instead. The other way is just kind of a shortcut with the mask layer. So I'm just trying to figure out which areas are going to receive that moonlight and then establish as much as we can in this stage as possible. And then we'll get into rendering. Not that I'm going to actually do all that, but you don't want to skip to rendering when you haven't done this yet, where everything looks finished. So let's kind of put this here, dark, dark. Let's let the boot silhouette against the darkness there by putting some light on it. And then let's put this foreground element in darkness. Maybe let some rim light onto that as well. Maybe also from the moon. And then maybe even have some rays of light coming from the moon as well. Let's go ahead and get this tree in. And again, I'm not rendering, I'm just, you know, putting in information so that when we're zoomed out like this, it looks fairly done. To make this rim light really stand out, I would put something dark behind him. Let's make the tree really dark. And then I really like the this textured tree area back here, which looks pretty cool. So I want to bring that back, and then I can go in there and sort of be an artist and paint in between them and have a nice rhythm of shapes with the brush. And then like let some of that rim light happen also here from the moon. So a lot of it is just calculating light and shadow. Definitely on the grass area. Or was that snow? Yeah, it looks like it was snow. Actually, let's put that here. Maybe some clouds over here as well. So a quick trick with swords. What I like to do is make a selection of the sword, or anything metallic really, especially if it's flat. All right, and I'll hit Control J to copy it so it's on its own layer now. And then I'll take everything and duplicate it over on top of everything. So it's just like kind of a standalone layer. And I'll hold Alt so that it does a clipping mask into the sword layer. And now watch what happens when I move this around by holding Control and moving it like that. Now I have a nice cool little reflection of, you know, the information that's in the painting, and then I can take that and smudge that with the mixer brush, kind of like this or something. And now it looks like a sword. Of course, you could paint in there and tweak it, like have one, since it's double-edged, you could make one edge darker, like that. Maybe even catching some blue light on it. All right. Anyway, so that's my little trick for that. And then from there, I'll start zooming in and saying, okay, well, I want to have a pattern of values also on him that kind of create a nice rhythm instead of being all the same value throughout. And then I'll start adding color. Let's see what we got here. So red cape, green shirt, got it. You could even make a new layer and then set that to overlay. Make that green. Let's pick red for the cape. And I'm pushing it really far right now, and then I'll pull back. All right, so it's a decent start. But as you can tell, now when we zoom out, the piece looks pretty finished. You know, as in like it's a complete statement. Like there isn't much that's missing. Like sure, I can get in there and say, okay, well I want to have more of the sky showing through the area here for more texture in the painting. Also, it would kind of act as compositional elements of things pointing this way to our focal point, right? And then one last thing, I'd probably do that color harmonizing thing with overlay. See, it kind of like makes the whole piece feel really moody, right? And then you could actually do your line decker study so that you know where the light will actually go over here. And then blue light over here on this side of the face, on the nose. Maybe blend it. So then it's like, okay, but how do you make it look like it's skin tone? There's a couple areas that have certain hue shift, and that's going to be red, and that's going to be at the nose. So what I'm going to do is make a new layer, set it to multiply, and then just kind of, it's going to look silly at first, but it'll look like a clown, like clown makeup. But if you just put red in these areas, so the nose, the cheeks, the mouth, around the eyes, and the ears, and sometimes the chin. If you just put red there, it looks silly now, but when we pull back, it automatically starts to read like it's skin tones, because that's kind of where we blush, where, you know, blood usually concentrates, especially when you're cold out there. And then if you look at the difference, there's no color, it's kind of muddy, and now because in those spots we have red, it looks a little bit more believable. And then we can go in there and blend it using the mixer brush, and you can barely tell that it was even there, but we pick it up subtly as, yeah, that's skin tone. And you could even add green in the shadows, which is kind of unexpected, but it also helps. Anyway, felt like you looked like you were pretty frustrated with that, so I figured I'd give you my 2 cents. Yeah, hope that helped. By the way, this is definitely not a critique.